Old Man Sarge here. This is a battle report, gameplay report, whatever you want to call it, for the Battle of the Bulge. I've read the rules on this. This is actually a very interesting, let me move some lights here, interesting game set. I'm not 100% sure the strategies that need to be employed at it. But let's just go over kind of the map. The map is basically the Battle of the Bulge. So you have various cities. Eupen, up north, Liege, of course Bastogne, famous for the 101st Defense, and multiple other cities. I think this one here that's kind of hidden is Saint Vith. This is essentially the front line in December of 1944 between the United States and the German front, and this is where Germany made their famous counterattack. I can't remember what the Germans called it, but it was known as the Battle of the Bulge in U.S. history. I find it interesting that they've done a lot of detail, like the 90th Division, Infantry Division up north, against the 26th and 272nd Volksgrenadier Division, and they go down and they talk about the armored divisions, like I think this one down here is, pardon me, this one is Panzerlehr. It won't focus. Here we go, Panzerlehr, and the 2nd Panzer Division, Panzerlehr, and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division. So they go into a lot of detail, 4th Infantry Division down south, of the units that were facing off against each other. And a lot of these are just portions of the divisions, they're not the entire division. The way I understand it is, some of these divisions from the United States were actually placed here for I guess relaxing and refurbishing as much as they can during a war, and the main German thrust hit them. So the Germans' goal is to get to 24 victory points, and each one of these cities has a certain amount of victory points associated, like Bastogne is 4. And you have in this game, to try to illustrate the supply problems. There are supply points that are associated with the game as well, and what happens is the phase is a little bit different than normal. The first phase is attack, of which the first turn the Germans are the only ones that can do it. And then the next phase is movement, and that's basically it goes attack and then movement. And then there are certain restrictions on movement, which you'd have to read the rules on, but they have to do with zones of control, which is essentially all the territories, because all these are hexes. So like you can see the hex here. So like this guy has a zone of control and all these hexes around him, and that slows the enemy down, your opponent down, from being able to get into certain places. So it'll slow his movement down. And then there's roads, and you can see the roads crisscrossing the map. Those enable faster movement, so you have like unlimited movement on the roads up to the point at which you enter a zone of control or you enter an enemy city. So there's two things that can really stop you: zone of controls and enemy cities. But the interesting about this game is you use a supply token to attack, and then you use a supply token to move. So it will limit your desire to attack every single place on the board, potentially, and it'll limit how much you can move. And so what ends up happening, I guess, in the actual Battle of the Bulge is the Germans, reached out way over here, perhaps, I'm not sure how far they got, but they essentially they ran out of fuel, and so basically their fighting capability was reduced. The other thing is the movement turns. The first 4 turns are overcast, snowy turns. It's not until the 5th turn that aircraft can be used, and then there's off-board aircraft from each force. And as you can see, the Germans are their air force is as big as what the British employed just against them in this portion, and then there's the entire American forces like twice as big. So they need to get as much territory as they can and get to the victory points as fast as they can, but they also want to minimize the usage of their supply. Now, they can capture supply points from the Allies, and that obviously, you know, like there's 2 hexes right there that have Allied supply. That's obviously going to be a probably a big movement, or a big I don't know how to explain it. That's going to be an objective of the Germans, is to capture as much Allied supply as they can to to maximize their movement capabilities and their sustainment in fighting on the front. So I've read the rules. I'm going to go over them a little bit more, and then we're going to get started on the game. And you can see here's the reinforcements coming in. So there's more German divisions coming in, and then the United States has like a north and a south, I believe, and then the British have some forces that will come in as well. Actually, I think it's the north, would be the west, and then the south of the area, and the Germans just come in from this table side here. Oh, I don't know it. Oh, must be the victory point counter. So that's what we'll be using for that. So we will we will return as this game gets rolling on. And thanks for tuning in. All right, so we are moving on to turn 2. I haven't actually counted up the victory points as of yet, but Germany essentially just used all their supply points to make attacks on the entire front line. They succeeded in wiping out many U.S. formations, except this infantry and this artillery from the 4th Infantry Division, part of the 4th Infantry Division, actually didn't get hurt at all. And so that's why the lines look the way they do. The Germans did use a blitz move, which cost them an additional supply point to do so, but that pushed them right next to the zone. The United States brought in reinforcements. They moved, they did a strategic withdrawal with the 4th Infantry Division, or part of it, and also the part of the 9th Armored Division to to try to stop this breakout that the Germans are having right now. It's still pretty open for Germany. Germany moved their trucks up with a bunch of supply that was a little bit further back. They just moved it one step forward. They were contemplating defending St. Vith, but after contemplation and looking at how things are progressing, they decided not to, and they decided instead to move their armor up to Espen, or whatever it is. Eupen? So they moved 2 armored units there, and then they built up Bastogne with infantry, 2 infantry and artillery, and 2 armored divisions, so that the Germans won't be able to attack that immediately anyway. So we're moving on to turn 2, and I'll count up the victory points and I'll give that to you. Let's see, 2, 3. I would say the Germans have 3 victory points as of right now. Alright, we will return with the second turn. How far can the Germans push? Will they get 24 victory points and win the game? We'll find out. So here we are going into turn 3 of 8. The Germans right now have 9 victory points. I made sure I counted that this time. Up north, they did an attack, but all they did was retreat a U.S. tank. They did take St. Vith, or whatever it is. And the United States is building up a little bit of a force around Malmedy, but their major force that they're trying to build is around Bastogne. So they have, 2 armored units and 6 infantry and 2 artillery and some and some supply points. But the Germans, however, have moved up many of their armored divisions to surround this location, but they are starting to have some supply problems, as you would expect in the Battle of the Bulge. So we're moving on to turn 3, and I don't really know how this is going to turn out. This could be bloody, both ways. But they got to keep pushing. Germans got to get some of these other victory points back in here. I'm not sure if it's better to sit back and fight, or just go around Bastogne as they actually did. So the American defenses are starting to solidify a little bit. Some Germans are still getting some decent reinforcements in, but the Allies are also getting some in as well. In fact, the first British unit shows up. So we'll be back after the end of turn 3. Alright, we are moving on to turn 4. So this is the end of turn 3. This game seems pretty balanced. I mean, I thought maybe it wasn't, but at least so far it seems. And the only reason I'm saying that is because the supply seems to really hamper the Germans, even though they've got the material. I mean, so they're making a push over on this front, because there's some serious victory points on this edge. So they ran a truck up, and the problem with the Germans are having is the last 2 turns, the Allies, when they attacked the German hexes, they killed the trucks. So now the Germans have like just 2 trucks remaining, and they've got a front that probably takes at least 3 trucks to supply, and to keep it moving. And so they got to make a decision. So the decision that they made was, we'll just leave Bastogne alone for the moment, and we'll concentrate on this side because we can get some serious victory points over here. Anyway, it's pretty interesting. Some units of the Americans are getting isolated. I mean, they can't fight because they don't have supply. And so I think that's what the Germans were thinking, was they could press on that front. But then that leaves this front weak. So now Bastogne's going to push back. Anyway, kind of an interesting interesting turn of events. Also, I noticed that these 2 infantry are essentially stuck unless a truck drops off a piece of supply, and then the following turn consumes it to move them. Otherwise, they can't move. Because in this game, trucks can pick up troops like infantry and artillery, but to do so, they have to spend a supply point to pick them up. Now they can bring them in off board, but they can't just pick up people. Anyway, pretty interesting. Alright, we are moving on to turn 4. We will be back with the next turn's report. Next turn, turn 5, aircraft are going to be coming in, and that should really turn the tide against the Axis, I would think. Alright, we have finished turn 4. We're moving on to turn 5. I don't think the Germans got far enough. They have 14 victory points. They need 10 more. They might be able to pick up a few here and there, but German or American and British aircraft are in the battle now. So is the German aircraft, of course. I put them in already for turn 5 just to show you where they're trying to affect the combats. So you can see the line stretches from here all the way around this unit that's basically been kind of trapped there for most of the game, but they're not completely cut off yet. And then the United States pushed out of Bastogne to try to cut off the Germans and maybe pocket these 3 armored divisions there. The Germans beefed up their front line and they brought supplies up to the front. And the Americans are trying to just bludgeon their efforts to try to take Bastogne. Germans are making another attempt at Bastogne. They didn't even surround it like they did in the actual war. So we'll be back after the turn 4, and we'll let you know how this turned out. Or turn 5, pardon me. So we're moving on to turn 5. At the end of turn 5, I'll do another little report. Thank you for watching. Alright, turn 5 is ended. Turn 6 is about ready to begin. The Germans did push forward and take that city. But the Americans have quite a bit of armor and support. Any fallen infantry in Liege. But the Germans actually have made progress. And they've reconnected to the troops that were kind of out of supply. So they might be able to push a little further. They weren't able to take out the Bastogne, you know, I guess, Bulge in their lines. The Americans had to place their aircraft first. They didn't know where the Germans were going to go, so they kind of just put a couple fighters in different locations that they thought, and then they put their major emphasis to try to stop this this force from being able to attack Liege. And the Germans decided to go after this territory, which is between 2 impassable terrain areas. And if they can clear it, they might be able to capture a lot of supply and a lot of victory points. So we'll be back at the end of turn 6. We'll see how the Germans do. The British at the very bottom have pushed the Germans back, and the Americans next to Bastogne have pushed them back. So yeah, the Germans aren't doing so good in the southern section, but they're doing better in the northern and central area. And we will return after the next turn, which will be turn 6. Well, that's interesting. Once the Germans got their lead units back in supply, they drove right up. So they pushed right up into the center of the board. Quite a big push. They're not doing well at all around Bastogne, but in the center they pushed way up, and they're also trying to take out Liege, which would give them 4 victory points plus 3, would be 7. That'd be enough for them to win the game if they could. Alright, they get 4, and I'm not sure that they have anything accessible right at the moment. What they do is a little harder to get, maybe. So, interesting. Yeah, it's going to be interesting final push by the Germans to try to capture some major victory points. I mean, there's this one back here that's worth 5 if they can get it. 3 there, 3 there, and there's supply that can keep them going. But they're out of reinforcements, so they also did capture a U.S. truck. So we're moving on. This is turn 7, or we're moving on to turn 7 right now. This is the end of turn 6, and it's 18 victory points right now. So I mean, it feels like a pretty good game for the Germans, even though I think next time I play it, the Germans need to. When I play the Germans, they'll have to maybe be a little more cautious with their supply at the beginning. You just have a lot and you think you're good to go, and then, yeah, no, it doesn't turn out that way. So I'll be back at the end of turn 7. Alright, this is the last turn. The Axis does have a chance. The Germans, if they can take Liege and La Roche, they could potentially win the game. Liege and La Roche will give them the game. I don't think they can take anything else, and they didn't put any supplies, because they couldn't, against Bastogne. So that whole Bastogne front, they gave up on. They're just trying to hold on to what they've got now. And they weren't able to push beyond this point, and they've been bottled back up again. But if they can get La Roche and Liege, they'll have enough victory points. So we'll return, and we'll let you know how it turned out. Alright, here we are at the end of the game. The Germans got to 19 victory points. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. You can see that at the very end of the game, the Germans didn't have any supply points. The United States blew through this line right here, and then blitzed their tank back to take this city back. And it's kind of a cool little thing to happen, because that city was the one that held out on the first turn of attack by the Germans. The Germans didn't get, they just got as far as Bastogne, and they got, I think, around right on the outside, but the United States recaptured Hafales, and the Germans at the very end were able to take La Roche. If they would have taken La Roche and Liege, they might have been able to win the game, but it was kind of a long shot to do so. And the United States threw all their aircraft that they can possibly throw at the forces on Ververs, and forced a lot of the troops back, and then they do the same thing here. But the Germans were able to just move into La Roche because they were able to destroy the force there. And so that's the end. Not bad, not bad. I think that Germany needs to be more cautious with its supply at the very beginning of the game, because it's going to need it midpoint, and I don't think blitzing is really a good thing to do until you reach a certain point. And I would say you probably don't want to start blitzing until your forces have reached this central area, and maybe not blitz around Bastogne until you can knock the Allies completely out of supply. That would be just my guess. But it seems like a pretty well balanced game. It was pretty exciting the last two turns, even though the air power was in the game and was stalling the Germans. What really happened was the Germans ran out of supply about mid-game, and their trucks kept dying, and that was kind of a bad thing for them too. They did capture one truck, so they only had one truck at the end of the game bringing supplies in. And that means you can only really bring it to one front or the other. Even though you've got troops, they can't really do anything. They're just kind of stuck there. The United States seem to always have enough trucks and supply, so I'm sure that's the way it's supposed to be. And in case you didn't know, there's these little impassable zones, just in case you were thinking, well, why didn't you go around or whatever? Well, there's an impassable zone between, there's like a gap right here between two impassable zones. Just in case you were wondering why. You can't actually even go, I mean, that impassable zone stretches all the way to Liege. So there's this one little gap that you could shoot through, which is what the Germans did. And they had a chance to go on and hit Huy or Cini, but they did not. They got it as far as just past the gap, and the Americans were able to stop them, and they also ran out of supply. There's the game, Battle of the Bulge. We'll do it again. I think I'll do a better job next time, now that I know how it kind of flows. And the next game will be Guadalcanal, so I'll show you the cover of that one. So I'll record that one. And again, I don't know how the game plays, never played it before. We'll give it a shot. but we played D-Day and now Battle of Bastogne, and we'll do Guadalcanal, and we'll move on to other things. So this is Old Man Sarge. Thank you for watching.